story.
Am I the a-hole for dropping our dinner on the ground and walking out when my boyfriend asked me, "What's for dinner tonight, bitch?" I was over my boyfriend's apartment this weekend, and I was cooking dinner because he was studying for exams. The aroma of simmering tomato sauce and herbs filled the small kitchen as I stirred the pot, adding the final touches to the hearty meal I had prepared. My boyfriend, Tom, had been holed up in his room for hours, buried in textbooks and notes. I could hear the occasional frustrated sigh or the rapid tapping of his keyboard as he worked. As I ladled the chunky sauce over perfectly cooked pasta, I called out to Tom, letting him know dinner was ready. I heard the scrape of his chair and his footsteps approaching. My lips curved into a smile, anticipating his appreciation for the home-cooked meal. But as he entered the kitchen, his words hit me like a slap in the face. "What's for dinner tonight, beach?" he said, emphasizing the last word with a smirk. Time seemed to slow down as the word echoed in my ears. Memories of past abuse flooded my mind, faces of those who had used that word to demean and control me flashing before my eyes. The weight of my exhausting day at work, coupled with the effort I'd put into making this meal, suddenly felt overwhelming. In a moment of blind fury, I let the pot of sauce slip from my hands. It hit the floor with a resounding crash, splattering red sauce across the tiles and onto Tom's pristine white rug. The silence that followed was deafening. "Well, nothing's for dinner tonight now," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "And I better not hear you using that word again. It's for the girls." Tom's face contorted with shock and anger. "You're seriously acting like a bitch right now. I don't know what else to call it," he spat out. Without another word, I grabbed my purse and stormed out of the apartment. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, helping to clear my head. I found myself walking to my friend Sarah's place, picking up some takeout on the way. Sarah listened sympathetically as I recounted the incident over a bottle of wine. Her roommate joined us, and soon we were all discussing the absurdity of the situation. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages from Tom, but I ignored them, letting the warmth of the wine and the comfort of friendship wash over me. It wasn't until the next morning that I finally looked at my phone. Tom had sent a barrage of texts and voice messages, all trying to explain that "what's for dinner tonight, bitch" was a TikTok trend, and he was just quoting it as a joke for his own TikTok video. His excuse only fueled my anger. The idea that he thought it was acceptable to demean me for the sake of social media likes was infuriating. I had come over specifically to help him while he was studying, and this was how he chose to repay my kindness? Then came the text that pushed me over the edge. Tom was demanding that I come back to clean his rug, claiming he was too busy with exams to do it himself. The audacity of his request, coupled with the realization that he had left the mess overnight, disgusted me. I fired back a text. "Yeah, so that's the betch tax, honey. Leave me alone till you're ready to handle your own cooking and cleaning because this betch isn't anymore. Also, it's vile you left that soaking in all night." Tom's response was swift. He called, his voice a mix of frustration and attempts at reconciliation. He argued that while he was fine doing his own chores, I was responsible for cleaning up the mess I had made. But I stood my ground. "Yeah, no, I'm not comfortable doing chores for you if you see me like your bitch," I retorted. As Tom continued to defend himself, insisting it was just a trend, my patience wore thin. In a moment of sarcastic inspiration, I shot back, "Well, I'm starting a trend called saucing, where, as a little joke, people throw pasta sauce around. You can't be mad because it's just a little trend, a little jokey joke, just a little prank, bro." The line went dead as Tom hung up, leaving me to wonder if this ridiculous TikTok-inspired incident would be the death knell for our relationship. As I sat there, staring at my silent phone, I couldn't help but reflect on the events that had unfolded. The weight of my actions, the lingering hurt from Tom's words, and the uncertainty of our future all swirled in my mind. Am I the a-hole or not? Comment 1. Not the a-hole. Nice job, BTW, and I love the saucing response. Go find someone whose maturity and sense of humor match yours. This one ain't it. It's not the sauce that's the problem. It's the whole man. Comment 2. Not the a-hole. I Googled the trend, and it is all about seeing how women react to a knowingly offensive comment, and usually they are offended. These jokes aren't funny. Well, you reacted. He got his wish, effed around and found out. He needs to grow up. Story. Am I the a-hole for silently getting up and walking out of the restaurant during NYE dinner after I was told to pay for everyone at the table? My in-laws. I, female 32, recently inherited a good amount of money from my mom. The unexpected windfall came as a bittersweet surprise, a final gift from the woman who had raised me single-handedly. In the weeks following her passing, I found myself grappling with a mix of grief and uncertainty. The inheritance represented more than just money. It was a tangible reminder of my mother's love and sacrifice. Unsure of how to honor her memory best, I decided to keep the money in a separate account, away from our joint finances. I wanted time to reflect on the best use for this unexpected blessing, to ensure it wouldn't be frittered away on day-to-day expenses. However, my husband seemed to have other ideas. Almost from the moment he learned about the inheritance, he began dropping hints and making suggestions about how we could spend it. At first, it was subtle, a casual mention of a luxury vacation we'd always dreamed of, or an offhand comment about upgrading our car. But as the days passed, his hints became more frequent and less subtle. I noticed a shift in our financial dynamic as well. Suddenly, my husband expected me to foot the bill for nearly everything. Dinners out, groceries, household repairs, all of these now fell squarely on my shoulders. When I gently reminded him that the inheritance was separate from our regular finances, he'd brush it off with a laugh, saying, "Come on, you can afford it now." The situation came to a head on New Year's Eve. We had plans to meet my husband's family at an upscale restaurant to ring in the new year. As we pulled up to the valet, I couldn't shake a nagging feeling of unease. The evening started pleasantly enough. The restaurant was beautifully decorated, the champagne was flowing, and conversation around the table was lively. But as the night wore on, I began to notice pointed glances in my direction whenever the waiter approached with refills or to clear plates. It wasn't until my mother-in-law made a joke about paying for dinner out of my inheritance pocket that the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. They were expecting me to pick up the tab for the entire table, a table of 12 people at one of the most expensive restaurants in town. In that moment, I felt a surge of emotions, anger, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of being used. Without a word, I signaled the waiter and quietly paid for my own meal and drinks. Then, amid the shocked silence of my in-laws, I stood up and walked out of the restaurant. Behind me, I could hear the commotion as my husband and his family realized what was happening. Their voices rose in a cacophony of protests and demands, but I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. It was 3 a.m. when my husband finally stumbled through the front door, reeking of alcohol and seething with anger. He launched into a tirade, calling me pathetic for walking out on him and his family. "They relied on you to pay for their food," he shouted, his face red with fury. "They thought you were gracious enough to do it, but they were wrong. You humiliated me and my family." I sat in stunned silence as he continued his rant, accusing me of using the dinner as an opportunity to get back at his family for not helping my mother when she was sick. The accusation stung, not because it was true, but because it revealed how little he understood my grief and my desire to honor my mother's memory. As the first light of the new year began to creep through our windows, I found myself at a crossroads. My husband's behavior had exposed a rift in our relationship that I wasn't sure could be bridged. He saw my inheritance as a windfall for us both, a chance to live large and impress his family. I saw it as a sacred trust, a final gift from my mother that deserved careful consideration. Now, as I sit here in the cold light of dawn, watching my husband sleep off his anger and alcohol, I can't help but wonder about the future of our marriage. His family is furious, claiming I've caused an irreparable rift. My husband insists it wouldn't have hurt me to pay for the celebratory dinner. But as I think about my mother and the lifetime of hard work that went into that inheritance, I find myself questioning everything. Am I the a-hole or not? Comment 1, not the a-hole, and oh my gosh, your husband and in-laws are such assholes. Inheritance is not your husband's, full stop. He is an AH for trying to get so involved in how you spend it. Inheritance is certainly not your IL's, full stop. They should keep their mouths shut. You are grieving and only have an inheritance because your mother died. I bet you would gladly give the money back if it meant having your mom back. When you're grieving, anyone acting remotely excited about spending your inheritance basically risks coming across as a heartless AH. Hooray! We have money to spend because your loved one died. Yay for me! They are all insensitive AHs for acting like this. Who relies on someone else to pay for anything, from inheritance or other money, without that being agreed upon beforehand? Either they are ridiculously entitled, or your husband told them you would, so they expected it, or possibly both. AH is all around. I think you handled this very well. You could have caused a scene. Instead, you quietly left. Contact a lawyer and make sure your inheritance and other assets are protected from your husband. And consider whether this is a relationship shop worth keeping. Comment 2. Not the a-hole. It is time to speak to a good lawyer and get that money into some type of trust that he cannot touch in the event of divorce. Simply having it in a separate bank account is not sufficient to protect it in a divorce settlement. His behavior is not healthy or supportive, and it seems like he and his family seem entitled to your inheritance. This is not a good situation. I hope you can work through this, but still protect your money just in case. Story. Am I the a-hole for walking out of the airport when I saw my husband's mom standing there with her luggage? I, female 30, don't have the best relationship with my husband's mom. From the moment we met, she seemed determined to find fault with me, constantly comparing me unfavorably to her previous daughter-in-law. Her tactics shifted abruptly when she realized her initial approach wasn't working. Suddenly, she began showering me with excessive praise, even going so far as to mimic my style choices. The incident with the purple hair still stands out in my mind. She dyed her hair to match mine, then had the audacity to blame me when others pointed out how ridiculous she looked. Despite these ongoing tensions, my husband and I had managed to carve out a semblance of peace in our lives. We both work demanding jobs, so when the opportunity for a 2-week vacation arose, we jumped at the chance. I had been meticulously saving and planning for months, while my husband was responsible for booking our flights. Our excitement was palpable as we discussed our itinerary, but it all came crashing down when my mother-in-law caught wind of our plans. Her reaction was nothing short of hysterical. She bombarded us with calls and texts, even sending family members to plead her case. When that didn't work, she resorted to threats, claiming she'd call the police with false accusations if we didn't include her. My husband, ever the peacekeeper, suggested we give in to her demands. I stood my ground, reminding him that he shouldn't have told her about the trip in the first place. His response was an ultimatum. Either his mother came along or he wouldn't go. Calling his bluff, I told him I'd be happy to travel alone. Faced with my determination, he backed down, promising to put an end to his mother's machinations. The days leading up to our departure were suspiciously quiet. No more calls, no more threats. I should have known it was too good to be true. On the day of our flight, we arrived at the airport at 2 p.m. My husband seemed distracted, his eyes darting around as if searching for someone. As we approached the waiting area, my heart sank. There stood my mother-in-law, luggage in hand, a triumphant smile on her face. In that moment, something inside me snapped. Without a word, I turned on my heel and headed for the exit. My husband's voice echoed behind me, pleading for me to stop, to be reasonable. He caught up to me, grabbing my arm, insisting that I was overreacting and that we should just accept the situation. His words fell on deaf ears. The betrayal cut too deep. I told him he and his mother were welcome to enjoy the trip without me, and I left. Back home, I found solace in the unconditional love of my dog, burying my face in his fur as I let out the emotions I'd been holding back. An hour later, my husband stormed in, his face red with anger. He berated me for ruining the trip, calling me pathetic and spiteful. I reminded him that this was all his doing. He had booked his mother a ticket behind my back, betraying my trust and our agreement. The argument escalated, with my husband eventually calling my family to inform them of the canceled trip, placing the blame squarely on my shoulders. To my dismay, my family sided with him, suggesting I should have sucked it up for the sake of the vacation. As the dust settled and silence fell over our home, I found myself replaying the events in my mind. The months of planning, the excitement, the anticipation, all destroyed in a single moment of betrayal. My husband's willingness to disregard my feelings and boundaries for the sake of appeasing his mother left me questioning the very foundation of our relationship. Am I the a-hole or not? Comment 1. Not the a-hole. I don't want to call the divorce card, but divorce. You told your boundaries. You said no. She crossed it. Your husband told you he would tell her no. He lied. He tried to pin you in a corner by not saying anything and bringing her anyways, and got upset you refused to be a part of his little trap. And then to berate you? He's not a good man. He needs to go. Comment 2. Definitely not the a-hole. You know that if you had sucked it up and gone with them, the entire vacation would be all about catering to his mom. Whatever she wanted to do, whatever places she wanted to go, places she wanted to eat. You'd be the third wheel on your own vacation, on your own vacation, on your own vacation.